Notre Dame Clemson coming up in just a few days. Part 2, of course, this time in Charlotte, this time for the ACC Championship and possibly for a college football playoff berth, depending on what the loser looks like, I guess, in this one. We got Nathan Erbach on the line from a Notre Dame podcast to be named. Nathan, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Mark. Happy to be here again, and always a pleasure to be on the show with you.
Good stuff. Well, let's talk about the news off the field that's going to impact on the field. Clark Lee, your defensive coordinator, who's gaining all sorts of credit for what's happened with that Irish defense this season, rumored to be the next coach at Vanderbilt. Your thoughts about the validity of those reports, and then beyond that, how that could impact the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much a done deal at this point. I mean, there's already been reports on Twitter from some really reputable sources, obviously. And then, there's been stuff out there that he's already spoken to his defensive players and his recruits as well, just to kind of give them the news and let them know, like any respectable coach should. So outside of that, though, I mean, obviously big blow to Notre Dame in general. I mean, he's an outstanding defensive coordinator, outstanding coach, and for all intent and purposes, an outstanding person as well. So obviously will be sorely missed at Notre Dame, and kudos to him for, finding a job and going home. I mean, he's a Vanderbilt guy. So that was sort of always like kind of the rumored destination for him if it did become open. And I can't help but think that it's possible that it became open almost because they were going to, try their hardest game anyway. But, I mean, I think Kelly has shown the last, 4 or 5 years that he's really improved in the sense of bringing in coaches, whether that be promotions from within, which is what he did with Lee when Elko left for Texas A&M. Same with obviously with Tommy Rees as well when Chip Long left. So I have all the faith in the world that that Kelly's going to be able to bring in a guy or like I said, promote from within and kind of keep the defense what it is essentially.
So the other concern, of course, Nathan, would be preparation for a huge game this Saturday. That for the winner, it's a college football playoff appearance. For the loser, as long as they keep it close, especially in Notre Dame's status at number 2 in the country undefeated, they're probably still in the college football playoff. If it gets out of hand, well, we'll see how far they would drop. But they seem to be in good shape for a playoff position. But your defensive coordinator moves on to another university, probably will stay on to coach the defense through any playoff and championship games. But he's trying to put together, obviously, he gains his first head coaching job in the SEC, no less, and wants to get off to a great start in recruiting, in building a coaching staff, in doing all the things that you have to do to transition to a job like that. Concern of the disparity or the distribution of time and labor in trying to do both at the same time.
Right. I mean, that's always a concern, of course. I mean, I think Clark Lee is really a true professional, and like I said, I have faith that he's going to be able to, to sort of balance both at the same time. It's already been reported he is going to stay on until Notre Dame is essentially through. Now, obviously, if they miss the college football playoff by chance, then I mean, there's a chance that he would leave in that regard, I would assume. But other than that, I mean, the defense is what it is. I don't think it's going to affect him on game days necessarily, and like during practices when they're preparing. It might take him away from, maybe some of the off-field stuff in preparation. But like I said, I mean, I think Clark Lee is as good as it gets when it comes to an assistant coach at the college level, and I don't think it's really going to affect Notre Dame that much. In regards to like the players and different things like that, and even the recruits for the most part, I think they're all just happy for him. And I think at this point, it's understandable when you have a program like a Notre Dame or or some of the elite programs out there like Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama. I mean, they lose assistants almost on a yearly basis at this point. Because those guys have aspirations to become head coaches too. So if anything, I think the players might play even harder for them. Obviously it's going to be in the biggest games of the year. So, I mean, they're obviously going to be prepared from that standpoint. And so, no, I mean, overall, I don't see it being too much of a distraction for the team or Coach Lee.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we love, best discussion, debate, and analysis. That's our goal. That's our objective and mission every day. And in what is probably, without scanning every single game throughout the years, the most anticipated power-packed ACC championship game in history. Both teams are playoff caliber teams. The loser, in Notre Dame's case, will probably still make the playoff. That's how good both of them are. Did you ever imagine, Nathan, that Notre Dame would not only be vying for a playoff spot, but maybe in a position on championship weekend to lose the game and still make the playoff, to be that highly regarded and to turn in this kind of season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I never expected Notre Dame to be in a conference. I guess no one really predicts a national pandemic, but yeah, no. I mean, I always, usually this is a weekend where I'm sitting at home waiting for teams to either blow it or, or for Notre Dame to hold on if they did have a 12-0 season like in 2018 or something like that. So no, it's definitely I think we've talked about this before. It's certainly exciting and different. So I'm excited from that standpoint, but I mean, it's fun, and I'm glad Notre Dame is in the spot that they're in rather than Clemson's spot, because if they were to lose this game and originally lost to Clemson, I don't think there's any way they make the college football playoff. So I'm just happy they're going in as the undefeated team on Saturday.
So on the field, on the Clemson side, the storylines are Trevor Lawrence is back, 3 defensive starters back. On the Notre Dame side, that Ian Book made this great breakthrough against Notre Dame and against the rest of the schedule over the back half of this season. Getting past all of that we've broken down a number of times, are there any missing threads out there? Some nuances to the Notre Dame personnel, offense, defense, special teams that we might be missing that you think are going to be key and are probably undervalued?
Braden Lenzy is supposedly healthy, and he hasn't really played much this year, even when he has been healthy, partly just because he's been recovering and hasn't had too much, game time in general or too much practice time. So, I mean, if he is fully ready to go, which it looks like he is, I mean, he can definitely be a game changer in that regard. Dame can, throw a deep ball here and there a couple times throughout the game and maybe one hit. I mean, he's pretty much faster than anybody is in the country, or just as fast. So, from that standpoint, I think, there's an opportunity there for Notre Dame. Other than that, I mean, obviously just I think the consistent continuity of the wide receiver core. I mean, it's been growing, the entire season, and I still don't think it was at its best when they did play Clemson the first time around. I mean, Javon McKinley continues to grow as a player. Ben Skowronek is as healthy as he's been since he arrived, and he had he was dealing with a hamstring early on, and has really picked up his game. Michael Mayer is almost no longer a freshman at this point. And some of the other guys like Avery Davis and even to an extent, like I already mentioned, Braden Lenzy, all those guys have started to get a little bit more game time. And I think that's only going to help. I mean, those guys are, from game 7 to game now, or to game, 12 or 11 from now. I do think that's actually a pretty big deal that most people aren't talking about.
National Signing Day on Wednesday. Your thoughts on Notre Dame's class and any loose ends out there? Any guys on the borderline that could really make this a special class?
So they just offered a Michigan State running back commit. His name is Audric Estime, 4-star kid, really powerful big back that has some speed. I think he's listed at like 6'1.5". 215, 220, and if you've seen pictures of him, he's pretty rocked up. He looks kind of like the traditional Alabama type running backs, SEC caliber. Like I said, I mean, obviously committed to Michigan State, plays at a powerhouse in New Jersey, St. Joseph Regional, who's been pretty kind to Notre Dame in the past. So a lot of people think they're going to end up in Notre Dame's class, whether that be here in a couple days or in February, at least officially in February. Other than that, though, I mean, outside of maybe a surprise or two, because of the Clark Lee departure, I mean, they have another running back committed right now in Logan Diggs. He's got an offer from LSU, and he's a Louisiana kid. So, I mean, obviously you got to look out for that. I mean, if he decides that that's really where he wants to be, growing up in that state, and, LSU probably being his dream school as a kid, I mean, that's something to look out for. But overall, at least from the sources I've been able to connect with over the last few days, Even regarding, like I said, Clark Lee's departure. I mean, Prince Colley, who's a Tennessee kid, who has a really good relationship with Clark Lee. I mean, there's been a few talks here and there that maybe he's, at least listening to some other programs, but I really don't see anybody leaving. And if someone did, I mean, I would probably venture to guess it would be Logan Diggs, just because of the LSU Louisiana connection. But these kids have been committed for so long; they've developed really good relationships. Notre Dame, particularly, is really good. Of all the kids in the class, always seem to have great relationships with each other. They have text message groups throughout the entire cycle. And they build a really special bond. And I'm not trying to say that that's not, evident elsewhere. It probably is. But there's just one thing since I really started covering Notre Dame recruiting over the last few years is, especially when Notre Dame is good, they don't lose many recruits. If anything, they land extra recruits at the end of the cycle. And that's what they've done this year. And I think they're going to do it at least one more time.
We always get a ton out of Nathan Urbach covering Notre Dame football. Of course, the Irish with a huge matchup and a very different matchup for Notre Dame football and trying to win a conference championship in the ACC against Clemson. Part 2 in Charlotte. Nathan, we always appreciate the conversation, man.